Right, and welcome back to BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. And here we have a great and wonderful visitor, Kara Vines, a DOT consultant. How are you today?
I'm good. How are y'all?
We're doing fantastic. Why don't you tell us a little bit your name and who you work for?
My name is Kara Vines. I work for IRONWOOD Business Consulting. We're a multi-part. We consult for all aspects of any business.
Gotcha. On that DOT, I bet you last year we saw a lot of new entrants into the industry. Did you see a big influx in your business as well with new businesses, the new companies entering in this transportation market, looking for some help, some consulting on the DOT side?
We did. So it's always ideal if people will reach out on the front side and let us help them and guide them with with their setup. You know, it's a lot to navigate whenever you don't really know what you're applying for. But yes, we did see a lot of the pop-up smaller businesses, the spin-off businesses. So
And it's
business was good.
and I can imagine it's nice, like you said, to get those as they begin. But unfortunately, how many of these calls do you get? Like, hey, I'm getting audited. Can you come and help?
Yeah. When is it? Do you get more calls at the beginning, or do you get calls when all of a sudden I realize I'm in over my head?
Most of it is whenever they realize they're over their head, honestly.
It's time to.
What can you do to save me? And at that point, you bring up a great point. It's there's so many practices that have to happen, and I want you to talk a little bit about that. Best practices for some of these newer trucking companies entering the market. For example, having a handbook, and then following the handbook, right? If you do have that handbook, the consortium for the randoms. Talk to us about some of these must-dos for the newer companies entering in.
Well, so I think definitely you've touched on a couple of those things. It's extremely important that they get started off correctly. They have their random consortium. They're enrolled in the clearinghouse. It's absolutely mind blowing the number of people that we come in contact with that have never even heard of the clearinghouse. They don't realize that information is available to them for $1.25, and that they're just not participating. So the numbers there are pretty crazy. Matter of fact, there's only about 21% of the trucking companies in Texas that are registered with the clearinghouse.
Wow,
Whenever
that's shocking.
when you
That
look
is
at the
shocking.
fact that there are almost 100 million people who are prohibited right now, and people are just putting them in the trucks, they just genuinely don't know. So that's a couple of the big ones.
Yeah, and you bring up the clearinghouse because when we talk to companies, and it's not just smaller companies. I think it's just they just don't know. But those are the same companies that never seem to have a problem in hiring people. Right? We're not having any problem hiring people. And I always say,
Trucks
well,
are full.
are you a part of the clearinghouse program? So yeah, so it's that has really taken a lot of people
I didn't
out
realize
of it.
it was that
Oh
many.
yeah, that's crazy to think that many aren't registered on it. Hey, talk to us as well about the policy books, right? For those companies that have a policy book, the importance of perhaps following that, almost to a T.
So I think it's the most critical. I think it's better to not have one at all, right, than to
I
have
agree.
something in place and then you don't follow it. I mean, if you have something in your handbook that says we're zero tolerance, we allow no cell phone use while the truck's moving, but then they have a crash and their phone records are subpoenaed and they've been on a 1 hour long phone call with their memo. I don't know how you even argue that when you put it in writing and you've had drivers sign it and you're insisting that that's what you follow, but then you don't follow it. So I think for us, as we meet with companies, we always ask, they have a handbook? If they do, we look at it and then we piece it out and say, okay, you are saying you're zero tolerance on cell phones.
Yeah,
Do you call your drivers to dispatch them?
perfect.
Well, then you're not zero tolerance.
Nope, I agree. And for those companies like Drive Safe Dave, if he had a company out there, his policy book would be written in pencil so he could go back and erase it. That doesn't work. See, he's got the pencil on him. It doesn't work like that. You've got to really follow those things. Follow your, the protocols that you have in there,
hiring protocols.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, you got hiring protocols. Do what now?
Discipline.
Yeah, you got to be disciplined to what you say you're going to do, and then do it that way, and stick to the guidelines. I mean, if you say you're not going to allow people that with certain criteria, you don't hire them just because you got to get somebody in the seat.
For sure.
I know y'all probably hear it, but that's what we see is, there's just no drivers, right? That's the story that everyone tells. And so when I meet with companies, that's the most common narrative that I'm getting is, we've had to go back on our hiring practices. We've had to relax our hiring practices. We just can't get drivers. And I'm going to tell you, I'd like to say, one of my favorite things whenever I meet with a new company is I always look at their CSA scores. And the number of people that don't know anything about CSA is almost as shocking as the people that don't use a clearinghouse, right? That's your trucking credit score. You don't go to the bank and try to get a loan with a 600 credit score, right? So you're not gonna be appealing to insurance companies. You're not gonna be appealing to larger companies you want to work with if your CSA scores are garbage. Yeah. And so I gotta say, Sir Rick, I mean, I was pretty impressed with your CSA scores. I'm not saying that because I'm interviewing with you, but I was pretty impressed.
Well, thank you. We spend a lot of time. We really do spend it. But Kara, I'm going to tell you this. One thing that we've learned and other people have got to learn, and I think, they've got to reach out to folks like you because just like your credit score, just because it's on your credit report, it doesn't mean it's accurate. Sometimes you've got to fight back.
You're right.
And you know what? And also when you talk about your credit score, you go after the things that are the worst on the score to help benefit. That score is there to also help you to be better, to go after the things that you need to fix, the things you need to work on, and the things you need to focus on so that you can bring it all up. And you've got to work at it as a whole and stuff like that. So here you are. You're I did want to talk about two things. Number one was the forward-facing cameras. I see on here. Talk to us about forward-facing cameras and your viewpoint when you talk to new carriers or carriers about forward-facing cameras.
I don't think you can put a truck on the road today and not have cameras. I think you need those forward-facing cameras just to protect you and to protect your drivers. But I think equally as important, I think you need those in-cab cameras. I think you need both. I don't think you can put a driver in a possibly $1 million plus truck, right, that belongs to you and your company. It's an asset, and not have some way, not only to try to point the finger at the driver or try to make it like the driver's always wrong, but to protect your drivers, right? There's as much at stake to protect your driver from someone who swerves in and cuts them off or possibly hits them. And then there's three sides to every story, right? There's yours, there's mine, and there's the truth. And sometimes that truth lays in some gray, foggy area, especially if there's no witnesses. So I think it's mission critical.
Yeah, when it comes to those cameras too, and I'm a big believer is that if you're new to the camera system, you're going to install those cameras, and let's just say you're using the forward-facing cameras, you still have to make sure. I don't say you still. But that is the time to go back and review your policy book on your safety with your driver to make sure that what you're seeing out there, you're following here. Because, when you didn't have those cameras, you could make all of these rules to say if they ever leave the lane, we're terminating them or something like that. And you're going to see a lot of that as you educate the drivers using cameras to teach and educate, not to punish and get rid of. But you still have to make sure your handbook is following the processes and procedures you're using with those cameras.
100%.
We talked today about cameras and we look at them. I think it's important to also realize that the camera view has to be reviewed. It can't be just for when something bad happens. It can't be for just when that accident occurs that we go back and we look at the film. I think if you have opportunity with forward-facing cameras, I think you take a look at that video and you take a look and you go out there and you try to help educate. You try to help fix some of the pains that you're having that can help stop some of the accidents in the future.
You're right. And it's also a great opportunity to incentivize your drivers. I mean, people talk to me about they can't find drivers and they can't keep drivers. And so my first question is, what do you do to retain them? When they get a clean level 1 inspection, what do you do for those guys? Do you give them any kind of bonus? Are you recognizing those people? When you have your cameras, if you see that they've had a really close near miss, but they've done something to prevent an accident on your record and possibly prevent a serious injury or death to someone else, what are you doing to recognize those people? I think that's how you keep drivers. I don't think it's necessarily going and chasing new drivers. I think you keep the ones that you have.
Yeah, it's turnover is a big deal in our industry, and again, using the technology. Be careful when you first get it, because you can go use it to train and to teach. We often say here on BCB Live that it's just like a basketball player, NBA player, that you've got to use film to make you better. Meaning that as a driver, you've got to be willing to not only learn from your own perhaps mistakes or things that you do that others have done right. You got to be able to apply their decisions into your day-to-day decision to maintain that that attitude, that decision to be safe out there.
Absolutely.
Drive Safe Dave, you have a big old Bible right
Yeah,
there. What is that thing?
So here it is. I went ahead and grabbed it because you are a person to help navigate this very intense, very large.
Does anybody even use that thing?
So when you sit down with a new carrier, a new person, and you set this, how hard is it to go through and explain some of the minimum requirements by law that this tells you to do, and what necessary, and also, do you ever expound on that it's good to do more than just what this book says?
It is. So, everybody jokes, everybody in the industry jokes and calls that the DOT Bible. I think just like the actual Bible, if you've never read the Bible, you're not going to pick up the Bible and jump into the Old Testament typically, right? You're going to go to the New Testament and you're going to try to pick up the high points, and then you're going to study and you're going to grow and you're going to want to learn more. So I think it's the exact same thing with that DOT handbook. I think everything that you need to know as a trucking company is in those pages. Now, the amount of time that you want to take to spend to study and learn and make yourself better as a company, I think that's a personal decision that ownership and safety professionals have to make. But they're bare minimums. I mean, so I do, and I take the high points. So I sit down with them and I say, you want to know about driver qualification? Everything you need to know is in 391. Go to 391 and start reading. It's going to tell you exactly what you need to do to qualify your driver to be safe according to the regs for the minimums. You want to know about hours of service? Go to 395. You want to know about vehicle maintenance? Go look up 396. There are some key parts that I think maybe carriers should start with. And then the more familiar they get and the more comfortable they get with that book, then I think it's expected. I think for every trucking company, it should be required that they know what's expected of them if they're putting trucks on the road.
No, for certain. And I was going to tell you right now, you lost Drive Safe David, Old Testament and New Testament. He's like, what is this book? What is this book she speaks of?
Yeah, okay, that's a great one. But I will tell you, I do like the idea, and also, as you look at the handbook and as you look at at the safety regulations, this is truly the minimum requirements under the law. It is not, and if you want to be really good at this industry and you want to be really safe, you need to find these key points and do better. If you're going to build that CSA score, you can't always rely on the minimum requirement under the law. You need to go out and do better, and you need to work on your safety program and your safety culture. How important is a safety culture in these new places that you go talk to? Not just the Bible, not just the handbook, but actually the culture, the idea, and the belief in safety that you go to and talk to these new companies.
So I'll tell you, when we go, we have a range. A lot of times we'll go in and it's key for us. We can really help these smaller companies, maybe these 5 to 10 truck carriers that they don't have the budget to have a full-time safety professional, a full-time DOT professional, a full-time HR professional. So that's a lot of our client base are these smaller companies where we can really help them out and be comprehensive. But at the same time, I think since COVID, we have really seen a huge trend in the larger companies, the 100 to 200 to 500 truck operations that they want to know, how can I be better, right? They recognize that, the better their scores are, the more money they're going to make, the more profitable they're going to be, because they're going to have better insurance rates. And so that's a lot of the relationships that we have too. But I can tell you wholeheartedly, from a 5-truck operation to a 500-truck operation, because I've sat in rooms with both, if you don't have buy-in from upper management, if ownership is not willing to get behind the safety professionals and support them while they make the drivers be accountable, there's no chance that the program is going to succeed. I think it has to come from the top, and it has to go down.
Yeah, agree. And I speak at every once in a while I'll speak at conference or whatever, and I say exactly what you say there. As a matter of fact, to the safety professionals out there, if you're working at a company that doesn't support you from the top down, and I'm talking about you safety folks, giving you the support you need, I just can't help but think you're at the wrong company. These companies have got to take safety serious, because when it comes to accidents, even from that perspective, when these accidents occur, it's nasty, it's ugly out there. What are you seeing, and what do you talk about to these newer carriers about safety regarding that accident and these massive lawsuits that we see?
Well, so we all heard about tort reform that came out last year. I think it's outstanding. I'm anxious to see some of the outcomes of those. I'm anxious to see some of the results for some recent lawsuits, to see how much relief people are actually getting. I think at the same time, it's a little bit scary, because it makes it even more of a struggle to try to emphasize how important those bare minimums, again, that bare minimum green book, those things that you must be doing to get your drivers hired. Man, can you imagine to be a company and to have a crash and you're not at fault, but you haven't done something as simple as run your driver's MVR before you put them in the truck, and so now you don't get any of the tort reform relief? I mean, I think it's horrible, but it's helpful. I think it's great. I'm excited to see where it goes, and I hope. I love to attend the TXTA conferences and the SMC, the Safety Management Council conferences, and I always love to hear what's in the pipeline. And best I can tell, I think they're still working to try to push for more relief, more reform. They're tweaking constantly those things that they put into place, and so I'm excited. I hope that it continues momentum. I think other states need to join and do the same. Clearly Texas is the best, so we led the pack there. But I'm anxious to see that spread. I think it needs to spread on a national level.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with you on that. Drive safe, Dave. When we talk about tort reform, when we talk about these accidents, I also believe that we as a trucking industry, we have got to stop just accepting things and fight back. I mean, so many times we're just settling outside of court for these, these lawsuits, or we're just settling to settle to settle. You know what? Fight back. Use your technology, use your process, your training that you've done to talk and show what you're really doing out there to make our industry safer. Don't do the bare minimum. I'm going to say that to any trucking company
Absolutely.
out there. You've got to go above and beyond. You've got to go above
be
and beyond.
Yeah, and to be successful, just like you said, you've got to do more. You got to be more, and you want to be more. I mean, I find that the desire and the need go hand in hand as we move forward in this industry, if we're going to change the way this industry is looked at. And I'm encouraged by you that you go to the TXTA and you go to these conferences. I encourage anybody that's associated with the industry to participate in their trucking associations, no matter where you are in the country. And it doesn't matter. You don't have to be the Texas. You can be the Pennsylvania Trucking Association. It doesn't matter. Get involved to help the process move forward so that we can all benefit from these changes that are taking place. And I appreciate some of the things that you're doing out there. If you have one tip that you want to give to a trucking company out there today that's looking or listening to this program, what would it be that hasn't had a safety professional like you or a consultant like you to come aboard?
Well, I think just to wrap up, the bare minimums, just like we talked about. And I know you don't want people to shoot for the bare minimums, but make sure that you're drug and alcohol testing your drivers. You have a good random program. Make sure you're doing the clearinghouse. PSP for $10, you get a full history of your drivers, and you get to see what kind of background they've had and what kind of roadside inspections they're having. Check your drivers, vet your drivers out, make sure that you're putting people that you trust behind the wheel, and then train them and retrain them. Take the time, spend the money to work with your drivers, to give them the tools that they need to be successful. I think people don't go into business because they say, well, I just want to barely scrape by. People start companies because they want to be successful, and they want to take care of their family, and they want to leave a legacy for their kids and their grandkids. And so I think that if you don't want to barely scrape by financially, then you can't barely scrape by with safety. It needs to be a top priority. And I think if people will get behind that, I think there's no chance a business won't succeed.
But you are tugging at our heart when you talk safety,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
I appreciate that a lot, Kara. Hey, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. If anybody needs to get a hold of you or Ironwood Consulting, how do they do that?
So we have a website. We're on LinkedIn, but basically www.ironwoodbcforbusinessconsulting.com. You can reach all of our professionals there at one spot.
Alrighty, and also
before you do that, I want to go out there and say to the new company out there, or to any company out there, if you don't have a safety person today in your company,
correct,
and you're the owner and you're trying to do it all,
you can't.
Let me tell you something. You've got to reach out and find somebody else. You're not the best person at that position. You've got to listen to that safety voice to you. As an owner of a small company, you tend to make decisions based on profitability. You've got to have that voice out there, and that's Kara's voice. That's voice from Ironwood or companies like that are talking to you about a safety decision. You will make bad decisions because you tend to make them on finances, not the safety and especially the regs. So I'm going to encourage each and every one of you, hey, reach out, get a hold of Kara or somebody in that at that position, in that role. Get help to make you a safer company.
Absolutely. All right, Kara, before you get out of here, man, we do appreciate you coming on. We're going to invite you back soon. But before you leave today, we'd like you to state your name, who you're with, and that you're watching BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. Can you do that?
I can. So my name is Kara Vines. I'm with Ironwood Business Consulting, and you're watching BCB Live, the safest station in the nation.
All righty. Thank you, Miss Kara. Be safe out there in West Texas. I know it's going to be a warm one, so I don't dress cool.
Drink lots of water.
Wear
Lots
orange.
of water.
Be seen.
Y'all be
All
safe.
right,
Keep
drive
up the
safe.
good work.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye now.